Welcome back to another episode of Digital Voices with Beau Tiffany. We talk about what's on our hearts, what's on our minds, and I get the pleasure of interviewing amazing guests. My guest today is Chris Warner. Chris began acting professionally over 2 decades ago in Austin, Texas. After some marked success in film, television, and commercials, Chris headed for the bright lights of Hollywood. Chris's last role was opposite Academy Award winner Kevin Spacey in The Life of David Gale. You might also recognize Chris opposite Tommy Lee Jones in the Academy Award-winning film No Country for Old Men, or with Benicio Del Toro's Jackie Boy in the groundbreaking movie Frank Miller's Sin City. In addition to Chris's successful film roles, you might also recognize him from TV shows like Prison Break, Criminal Minds, Friday Night Lights, The Event, NCIS Los Angeles, Justified, and Shut Eye. As one of the most respected character actors of his generation, Chris has cemented himself as an edgy, intense artist who leaves nothing to chance when he appears on screen. Hey, Chris, thanks for coming on Digital Voices. How are you doing today?
Hey, Bo, I'm doing great. Doing real good. Appreciate you having me on your show.
Oh, my pleasure. Kind of blew me away. 2 of my favorite movies you've acted in, No Country for Old Men and also Sin City. You know, as an actor, people only really see you for your on-screen persona, if you will. And I bet you there's a lot more to you than just that. So what I like to start with is kind of your origins. Where are you from originally?
Well, I was born in Virginia and raised in Texas. My mom is from Southwest Virginia. My dad's from upstate New York, and they actually met in the Army. Yeah, that's where it all started back in 1970.
I know you're an only child and an Army brat. What was that like growing up?
You know what? As an only child and an Army brat, bro, you're definitely, I don't say forced, but it's best if you learn how to acclimate very quickly and build a certain set of skills that reduce the amount of time to build relationships. You have to build rapport with people very quickly to be able to build the relationships and go as deep as you can before you're on the road off to the next destination being an Army brat.
Sure.
So I guess no one ever taught me those things. I guess I'm a very good observer, and that's what helps me with my acting career of listening and watching people. I'm a big people watcher. It also helps me as a storyteller, as a writer. And I guess somewhere along the way, I learned that if I wanted to get to know my surroundings and where to insert myself best, I better become a good listener and a good watcher, if that makes sense. So I use those skills on a regular basis, even going back when I was a kid, to try to make sure that I got the most out of every situation I was in. I didn't want to ever leave somewhere going, man, I wonder if that was this, or if I would have gone there, this would have happened. Right. I tried to make the most of every situation I put myself in.
So purposely living life to the fullest.
Only child. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but purposely living life to its fullest. You know, being the new guy all the time, I think you probably develop a certain amount of skills there too. I bet you're great with first impressions.
You know, I try to be, and that's the funny thing too, is when I'm stepping into a situation, I've already listened and heard a whole bunch of stuff in a very short amount of time. So I think the best way for you to build rapport, and this is something I actually have learned, especially from Tony Robbins. I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, but what the biggest way you build rapport is to make people around you that you want to be a part of, you got to make them feel important. And I don't mean that in a kind of superficial way. I mean that you really want to know about them and their life.
Yeah.
And when you allow people to speak about themselves and then you engage all things they said that you didn't know, there tends to be an anchor to that kind of surpasses a whole lot of information you have to give when you just listen to folks. So it's an amazing tool. I mean, it's even amazed myself using it sometimes. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool conversation.
It's amazing what you can learn. I love my podcast just for that. I've been able to talk to some really interesting people, gain insights that I never would have imagined starting out in this. And and one story collectively becomes the story of us. And I like that part of this too. What were you like when you were still in elementary school, traveling around? Were you into sports? What kind of stuff were you into?
Yeah, I've played sports since Pop Warner football, and I'm a big, firm believer in sports not only the environment that allows you to build camaraderie and relationships, but the other thing that has probably driven me most to chase a career like I have, because being an actor, I've done a lot of things in my life, but being an actor is one of the most challenging things I've ever tried to accomplish, is it builds a sense of competitiveness, and I mean that in a good way.
Sure.
And I think sometimes nowadays that it depends on the situation you're in, the setting you're in, but competitiveness has gotten some bad press, so to speak. But I think any child should be in some form of competitive activity when they're growing up, because it's going to help them take those punches in the mouth that life likes to provide when you become an adult. So yeah, I played sports. I played Texas high school football, which I don't know if you've heard much about it, but it tends to be, and it's true, it tends to be a religion in Texas, as compared to, let's say, I played middle school football in Virginia. They take their sport seriously there, but not near like they did in the state of Texas. And that was just kind of icing on the cake of playing in that state.
Sure. Because
they did take it seriously. And the last football game I ever played was in the old Texas Stadium where the Dallas Cowboys played. We played the first round of the playoffs on that field, which is pretty cool to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's a certain level of competitiveness you have to gain as a child along your life to even put yourself in a position to be on a team that does that. And I would just say, if you have a child out there and you're concerned about their level of confidence, of them being either bullied or just not maybe moving forward in life like you feel like they should, putting them in some form of competitive activity will inherently build the confidence in them. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen in the past, bullying and not moving forward virtually disappears.
Yeah. And I think it helps them figure out their strengths and weaknesses, because each of us is individual, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, what I've learned over time is focus on your strengths and build them to as strong as they can be, because what happens, it's not that you shouldn't give your weaknesses some attention, but if you get so caught up in trying to make your weaknesses as strong as your strengths, you're going to miss so much of life that could have been more fulfilling. Mm-hmm. And you're pretty much going to be mediocre at best if you try to make your weaknesses your complete strengths.
Right.
So I would definitely, if a kid is really intent and focused on doing something, it's sad to see a kid who, let's say, wants to sing in the 6th grade, and mom and dad or friends aren't supportive of that. They're actually the opposite. A lot of folks try to chase, or a lot of kids that try to chase art or the art and art form as a kid aren't encouraged enough, in my opinion. If they're going to fail, let them fail. Let them fail on their own. Yeah. Let them go out and let them experience it. And sure, that maybe they won't win in a contest. Maybe you won't place well, but allow life to teach them that experience. I wouldn't want people to teach me what their experience was doing it. Let them have the life experience and let them learn from that.
Were your parents pretty loose? Was it easy growing up for you? You got to explore a lot of different things, or did this come later, this drive?
So I was speaking to a buddy who I hadn't spoken to in almost like 26 years yesterday, kind of a childhood friend, and that came up with my parents, and I learned a lot from my mother, not by her just sitting down and teaching me lessons, but by what I spoke of earlier about observing and listening.
Yeah.
My mom was a getter, man. She kicked ass when she was alive, and she did it, if you could put it in a phrase, she did it her way. She grew up in a small town in Southwest Virginia. She ended up joining the military. She ended up paying her way through college with a GI Bill, with 2 degrees, and one in journalism and one in English. She was a high school teacher for 30 years. And she moved away from that small town and possibly getting trapped in that small town mentality. And, when she wanted to do something, I always observed her doing it, making a way for it to happen and doing it. And it wasn't necessarily about, like, I didn't have the money to do it. There could have been other obstacles. And to see her just plow through them or figure a way to get around them really stuck with me. And I think that's probably one of the attributes, one of the foundational attributes that's allowed me to pursue my career and get to the levels I've gotten so far.
Well, that's a great role model. I think that's a great example. Living by example is the best teacher. How was your dad, if I can ask?
Dad's good. He was a career military in the Army. And, you know, my dad's greatest strength is his kindness. He's got a real big heart. And this is from a guy who spent 20 years in the military and was in the Vietnam War. And a lot of times if you meet my dad, if he didn't necessarily talk about it, you wouldn't necessarily get the sense that he was a career military. He's not like the hard drill sergeant, you know, do this, don't do that kind of guy. Mm-hmm. He's a real sweet, kind of kind-hearted person. And to be able to, probably the biggest thing I've garnered from my dad is possibly his level of empathy that he has for the world. And I probably could work on that a little bit more than I have. But he's definitely allowed me to see through his eyes how to be respectful of other people's positions in life and not to be so hard on them. Like my competitive self that I learned a lot from my coaches growing up can tend to drive the train of my life sometimes. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I have to put on the brake a little bit and consider the way my dad kind of considers life and being more empathetic toward folks. And it also helps me as an actor when I'm doing a role. A lot of the roles I do play are kind of the tougher guys or the stronger guys. But it doesn't. What's more interesting than not sometimes when you're watching a movie or TV show is when you can show a character like I play be vulnerable. That's what most people pay $18 and $20 a seat to go see a movie for, is to see the unexpected.
Right.
So that's kind of a layer in my life to level up my acting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you got out of school, you were playing for Texas, or you're playing for your Texas high school football team. You learned your competitiveness and that drive. Sounds like a lot of it came from your coaches and what they were teaching there. That respect, I think, sounds like a lot from your parents. You also described to me the meaning of honor. Where do you get that from? Because that's really important to you as well.
You know, that probably comes from actually multiple places in my life as I was growing up. Growing up in the environment that had the military around it from the time I was born is probably the first layer. The foundation was laid with both my parents. They both, when you go into the military of any branch, I've had friends that have been in the Marines and the Navy, etc. You know, that's one of the most important attributes that they try to ingrain in you is honor toward your fellow soldier, honor toward your fellow man. Mm-hmm. That's probably where it started. The other part started where I in some of my bios I put, you know, born a military brat and raised in Texas. And being a Texan is another thing. There's a certain amount of pride and honor that Texans take in being Texans. Some of it can be put into words. Some of it you just have to go there and observe what I'm talking about. But that was definitely instilled in me once I started playing football in Texas. Is a lot of your Texas coaches have played Texas high school football before.
Sure.
So it's kind of a tradition that's been carried on. And what comes with honor is advancement. When you put that as one of your primary pillars, other things start to happen for you that progress you in life. And in that case, let's say if we're talking about Texas high school football or just playing on a team in general, your ultimate goal is to be the starter. But what I've learned so much of my life now is when I talk to kids, I said, hey, you shouldn't worry about who starts on the field. You should worry about who's on the field at the end of the game.
Right.
But ultimately, as a kid, you want to be the starter on a team. But to be a starter, I think, in my opinion, other than hard work, dedication, and commitment, you got to have that honor part because you're playing a team sport. And if you can't honor your fellow teammate and your fellow competitors, you're probably going to be standing on the sidelines a lot. So, from the military as a kid, all the way up to playing Texas high school football, those are probably the two strongest elements that allowed me to draw from when it comes to having honor in my life. And what's crazy is, as an actor and also more important as a writer, I tend to be drawn toward characters who have honor and but are flawed in that aspect. Because again, that's what kind of makes them a little more interesting to watch.
Right.
But honor is a big part of the characters that I tend to play and the characters I write about as well.
I want to get to that in a second. I want to ask one question about Texas. Where does Texas pride come from? Because it's unique. I wish all of us felt that sense of pride about where we're from. But Texas seems to be unique in that aspect where there's just an overwhelming sense of, I'm a Texan.
Well, I think it probably started with the fact that Texas was the only state in the union that was its own country at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that, we put a lot of emphasis, when you're in school, you actually take Texas history, and you put a lot of emphasis on the Alamo and, the old cliche, the old sayings, remember the Alamo. And what people, and I've had a few people that I've almost asked to step outside, is a lot of smart-ass people, excuse my French there, but a lot of smart-ass people like, yeah, man, but they died. The Alamo lost. You lost. No, they missed the point. The point is you had a handful of men going up against thousands and willing to do it. They could have ran. They could have chickened out and left. They didn't. They knew the odds were insurmountable. They knew it, and they still fought and died. And I don't know a lot of people that you come in contact with then and even now who are willing to do that kind of stuff. And that's kind of where the pride and honor of the military in general. But in Texas, you had a country basically who chose to join the union, which they didn't have to. And in the same vein, defend what they had fought for so long. So it's not necessarily about pride that we won. It's about pride that we're willing to fight, no matter what, for what we believe in and what we stand for. And when you see, and it has been a Texas tradition for so long, it's just taught from generation to generation, not only in the history books for Texas, and not only in things that are stated from one generation to the next, but going back to the way my mom lived her life, it's kind of the way Texans live their life. So you get to observe it as a Texan every day, every minute of every day.
Right. So
you kind of become your surroundings and your environment. But I would say those are probably two strong pillars as to why Texans are proud. It's because one, they're actually, Texas was a country before it was a state. It was its own country. And also using the pillar of the Alamo and fighting for what you believe in, even though you lost, is something, in my opinion, pretty admirable.
It's nice that it still resonates through history. That's the
it does.
That's what I think shows most prominently about it. So jumping forward a little bit, did you serve after high school?
I did not, actually. No. I went to college after high school, had a couple buddies join. It's funny, even though we take pride in it, and you look at things a little more differently when you're more mature and you've had life on you a little bit. But actually, me and my buddies as kids, a lot of my buddies' dads were in the military and some weren't. But we as kids used to make fun of GI sometimes, or military personnel, and kind of vowed as a group sometimes to not go in the military because we had bigger aspirations. We were going to rule the world, kind of thing. And as we come to find out when we become adults, the world has different plans.
Right.
As we say, but a few of my buddies did go. One of my best buddies actually joined right after high school. But his home life was a little different than mine. But to tell you the truth, I didn't have aspirations to serve. My appreciation for the military and what soldiers do probably came a little later. In my young adulthood than it did when I was younger, because when you're a part of something, sometimes you don't appreciate it as much as you do when you step away from it.
Sure.
So yeah, I never had a desire to join the military. when I was a youngster.
When did you start catching the acting bug?
So that too, I was never a thespian as a young kid. I played Santa Claus in the 5th grade in a play, and I played Santa Claus in a senior play. But they were kind of open to the class themselves. I was a kind of a ham, an attention whore, if you will, my whole life. I've kind of been a cut up, and but it never translated necessarily into performing. And I've always been a huge fan of movies my whole life. And about, I think it was probably 1995, 1996, I was having lunch with a friend of mine who I was actually going to school to be a physical therapist at that time, going to University of Texas, taking courses like kinesiology, biology, and kind of stuff. And I was working at a nursing home, and my friend was an occupational therapist, and we'd gone to lunch one day, and we were just talking about movies in general, and I told her a movie I saw that I was so disappointed I wanted to ask for my money back. And I was saying this off the cuff, and I don't mean it like I meant it then, that, this acting thing can't be that hard. I said, something went to the effect that I wanted to give it to her or whatever, and I didn't realize that kind of her personal life, all her friends were actors or artists in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing led to another, and she said, hey, you want to, hang out, maybe come to one of the acting classes. At this time, I lived in Austin, Texas. And so I started hanging out with her. I started going to acting class, and I thought, hey, this is kind of pretty cool. And it didn't take real long for the acting bug to bite and take hold. And probably within the first year I started engaging in that, I knew it was something that I wanted to pursue as a professional and for real, and to come out to Los Angeles and take it seriously, because it was the only thing I had done in my life up to that point to where time stood still for me.
Mm-hmm.
I never looked at the clock. I didn't worry about where I needed to be when I was doing it. I was only concentrating on either that scene, running these lines, working on a character voice or mannerism that I was working on. That time stood still for me. I mean, I was late to so many things sometimes and got in trouble so much because, again, I was solely concentrated on that. And I knew that at that point, if I'm going to move forward with something like this, I think I was 28 at the time, I need to get going, and I don't look like Adonis. So I've got to work on all my skills as far as being a good character actor that I could, to make sure that when I opened my mouth or I said a line or I emoted a certain emotion, that it was going to move people forward in their seats.
Mm-hmm.
So to get back to your original question, I got bit. The bug bit me about probably when I was about 28 years old, when I was working in a totally different industry.
Amazing how we're pulled in certain directions. Considering where you're at in high school to that, it's almost like a night and day shift in a certain extent. But you took a lot of the skills and disciplines that you learned growing up in that atmosphere in Texas, and especially with your coaches, that I think helped you within what you're doing now. One of which is that drive and dedication to go out and get it, and not take a no. What were the first kind of baby steps that you took to get into this industry?
Well, I'll speak to what you said just before you asked the question, then I'll tell you the baby steps I took.
Sure.
About the drive and the thickening of the skin.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell folks that and no matter what you want to pursue, do your best to get around people who help you build the thing you want to build. And that isn't necessarily, actually most of the time it's not the people that you grew up with or the people that tend to love you the most. It might not be your mom and dad. It might be your brother and sister or your best friend, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. They see you and they know your flaws, mm-hmm. and they know your weaknesses. So it's best to go get somebody who knows you from the get-go on what you want to accomplish, not necessarily what you haven't accomplished.
Sure.
Because that'll be brought up time and time again. Should you misstep? Should you not make something happen that you said you would? The people that you get around that know your goals and dreams, they're going to hold you accountable, and they're going to push you in the right direction, the right way.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to kick you when you're down. They're going to reach. They're going to put a hand out and they're going to pull you up.
Right.
It's not that you won't get told that you probably could have done a better way as they pull you up. They won't tell you that while they're kicking when you're down.
Right.
So my biggest thing is try to formulate as big and strong a support group towards your goal as you can to work and try to accomplish that. And when you do, they will help layer those levels of skin you're going to need for the nose on each and every time that they help you up. In reference to the baby steps you're talking about, so my first baby step was actually accidentally falling into a friendship with a person. Well, I guess the friendship wasn't falling into. There was a coworker, but falling into the fact that they were an actor and wanted to be an actor and a director. That I'm a firm believer that God puts signs and people in our lives for specific reasons at specific times. And He put her in my life at that time for something that obviously was aching inside my soul somewhere. And so we obviously had the right conversation. And when she said, "Hey, you want to hang out?" I had enough interest of what I wanted to do to say yes. Well, fortunately, up to that point, I had enough confidence to say yes. And that's kind of where putting yourself around people who will build you up, like in my opinion, my coaches and my mom, my wife at that time, had believed in me enough to be whatever I was at that time. So that gave me the confidence, yes, to, hey, you want to hang out with my acting friends or get together this weekend? Maybe maybe something is there that'll work for you. So I did. And then the next, when I got to that meeting or that hangout, hey, these people are pretty cool. You guys how do we get started on this? Oh, we take classes with so-and-so. Here's his number. Oh, cool. Let's give him a call. And with each step, sure, was there resistance along the way, but the resistance, my confidence pushed through the level of resistance that was offered. And I'm a kind of guy, I think, again, going back to where I was a kid, I don't ever want to do something badly. The first go, I go at it. Let's go do the best I can with what I have.
Right.
Now, will there be corrections? Sure. But I've got a saying. If I'm going to shit the bed, I might as well ruin the mattress. Let's go do that thing as hard as you can. And I know this even now is sometimes when I'm trying to work out a character or work on something, whether it's a voice or an intensity, and I'm in a room by myself and I'm running my lines and I'm working out where the inflection goes and where things stop, and I can tell where I half-ass it. I'm kind of just playing, and then when I crank up the heat, there's a different feeling in me when I'm actually playing and being the character than when I'm being the character than when I'm playing the character. So when it comes to the question you're asking, when it comes to baby steps, no matter what the step is, be dedicated to each individual step in and of itself. And that will give you the energy and the power and the confidence for the next step you need. But I think a lot of people look for this first step and like, oh, it's just a phone call to getting an Oscar. Well, you got to make the phone call to get to the coach, to get to the training, etc., to get to the Oscar.
Right.
Give that phone call as much attention and energy as you would do when you walk across the stage at the Dolby Theater and put the Oscar in your hand.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered the question or not.
No, it did, and then some. You have gone into acting and developed that, but then you've developed other talents as well. Screenwriting, directing, producing, voiceover talent. You've kind of started branching out after you found your skills, I'm assuming. That didn't happen overnight. Can you describe that process a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing that came after kind of definitely realizing, getting my feet wet and cemented in acting is, as an actor, you're kind of limited. You're held hostage to what the industry wants from you or how they see you, who can get you in that position to be that role. So really, you're just, for the most part, you're sitting at home waiting on a phone call for somebody who thinks you can play something. And one of the hardest things with acting is people don't realize you interview to interview. I mean, your headshot's an interview, but that's not a yes. A yes is you book the role. People don't understand that you got to send your headshot to you got to get an agent. So you got to send your headshot to your agent. And you get an agent. The agent's got to send the headshot to the casting director. The casting director has to send it to the director. And possibly, depending on what kind of project you're working on, to go to the producer. And that's all before you even meet them.
Mm-hmm.
So then you go in and you meet them in person, and you perform a role. And that's usually for the casting director. And they send it to the director, and then you make it a callback. And then you've got everybody in the room on a callback. And if you go into like a series regular for a TV show, then they have to test you with the other people that are going to be part of that show. So there's potential for a lot of no's and a lot of yeses along just one role before you're ever even the official yes. So as an actor, it can get a little disheartening just relying on that one avenue to become a creative. So it wasn't very long that I learned, hey, if I want to make this happen for me, I've got to put multiple lanes on the highway. I can't just go down one lane. It's going to take too long for me. I'm too ambitious. I got too much gumption in me.
Diversify.
So I started to write. Yeah, exactly. So I came up with a screenplay idea. I was just driving one day, and I went home, and I would not recommend this to anyone, but, try it if you want. I wrote my first full-length feature screenplay about 22 years ago on a Word document. They have screenwriting software now. First draft or final draft is what I use and what I've used shortly after that. But I sat down and I wrote my first feature screenplay. Other than reading Robert McKee's story, the book Story for Format, I had no formal training. I just knew I had a story in me. I wanted to write it the best way I could, and I read a book that told me how to format it. But being an actor, I kind of knew. I've read scripts before. I kind of know how things were laid out, and I sat down and in front of my computer, and it was mostly overnight that I would stay up on the weekends and write this because it was the quietest time I had. And I wrote my first screenplay probably about 3 years after I became an actor. I also wrote some shorts along the way, short screenplays, and I had written and co-produced a short screenplay with the person who, the former coworker who had got me interested and connected to acting. We produced that shortly after I wrote my first screenplay. So in that case, I had produced something early on, and it was really out of necessity. And what I mean by that is I'm not big on asking people permission to do something, especially if it's my idea.
Sure.
And the move forward, and especially if it's artistic. So we just wrote it, we cast it, and we shot it. And my co-producer had a camera. We hired a DP, a director of photography, from around the friends that we knew, because that's what you do. You just ask around, hey, who does camera, who does lighting,
right,
who does sound, and just being in that group helped me most. But so I probably went from just actor to actor, writer, producer in a very short amount of time, probably within 3 years.
Wow.
And then directing came later. I think directing had always been an interest of mine, but it didn't come till probably 10 or 12 years later. And sometimes I'm an actor first, so sometimes you get so caught up in that. But as I matured as an artist, I've definitely enjoyed directing, and it being kind of the only thing I do, except maybe writing what I directed. But I don't necessarily have to direct what I can direct something I didn't write. I think in and of itself, you have to be at the 30,000 foot level as a director to be able to do it well. So if I'm acting and directing in the same thing, which I've done, I think that your directing is not what it could be if you just do the directing in and of itself, because you have so many moving parts you have to make sure work. So yeah, ultimately, I think the biggest reason, other than enjoying doing each activity as an artist, I chose to create these avenues and diversify to increase my opportunities as an artist more than anything.
It's really smart, very intelligent. I think there's a lesson to be learned for our listeners in that if you put all your eggs in one basket, you're much better to diversify within your field. The fruits of your labor and the opportunities that come as a result of that, I think, multiply exponentially when you do it like that. Yeah,
it expands your network. You spider out to places you probably would have never even ventured. Mm-hmm. You make connections that again you might not have ever made, and it's all it all falls under the same entertainment creative umbrella. So I'm not acting and I'm going making wicker baskets, and on the other end I'm doing this. Right. Everything that I've worked to create under this umbrella supports the umbrella.
Yeah.
I've tried other things in the past. I've had like 57 different jobs in my life, in addition to acting. Just in my life, I had 3 jobs at one time. I was a stockbroker with Charles Schwab. Like I told you, I was going to be a physical therapist, and I worked as a home health aide. I've done some very humbling jobs, and what it's taught me more than anything is I gained life experience.
Yeah.
And it all led me down a path that told me as an entrepreneur, so to speak, if you're going to build a business, things that you do need to relate to building that business.
Mm-hmm.
They all need to kind of connect and jive together, because one will help the other. If one is flagging, you can figure out how to support it with the other things that you're trying to do. So,
right.
I did learn hard with it. I did in my life. So.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's really insightful, because I think all of those are the tools that you've developed that you bring into your craft. Also lets you identify and put yourself in others' positions, or be able to identify those positions because you might have been through them already yourself. For you, this has been kind of well-rounding your craft. You've diversified, you've picked up a ton of tools along the way, and you've grown in your art. All of that has been supported with an underlying theme, which I saw in your bio. You have a sense of value when it comes to your family that makes that a top priority amongst everything else. And the reason that I read that out of your bio is you mentioned when you're not busy doing your projects that you like to spend time with your queen at the beach. And in addition to that, you also do a lot of charity stuff, helping animals in need. It just says a lot about you. Tell us, what do you do in your free time? What makes you happy?
Well, that first one is the truth. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been together 32 years now, just over 32 years.
Wow.
Yeah, she's my rock, man. Most women would have left me by now, and the crazy stuff I've done and the path that I've taken. That I'm thankful to the Lord every day. That's not just some cliche. I'm very thankful and very grateful for her and the things that she's done for me, the things she's helped me do. What they say behind every great man is a greater woman, probably in this case. I couldn't have done some of the things I've done without her.
Yeah.
Even though I'm pretty good self dial in on the accountability. Sure, we all have off days and we all get lazy and, down on ourselves, and she's there to pick me up. And she believed in me probably more than I have over the course of trying to chase this crazy dream. Seeing the thing come, knowing the potential that was there. So yeah, any second or any chance I can get to spend the time with her, and make sure that relationship, it will always be that. I think a lot of folks, I think they think because you're married or because you're in a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, just the sheer fact that you're in a relationship, everything's cool, and that's not the case.
Right. If
you don't give a relationship the attention that it desires and requires, it will go away. And my wife and I both, unfortunately, come from some broken homes, and we made a pact from the beginning that we did not want that for our life, and we've done everything within our power to make sure that happens. So yeah, spending time together is priority one. We don't have children. We have 2 dogs. And we've kind of streamlined our life to make this acting thing as simple as possible. I don't say easy, but as simple.
Sure.
And she's really done some sacrificing for me, and I can't thank her enough. And yeah, we're fortunate to have her in my corner.
Yeah. What's her name?
Misty.
Misty, props to you. I think I don't think I've heard a sweeter thing come out of a manly guy like yourself, because you're a self-described badass, and I think that comes out a lot as well in your work. Let's talk about that a little bit. You've had some huge roles in terms of working with Kevin Spacey, Tommy Lee Jones, working on Sin City, which was a packed cast of amazing people. What are the big takeaways that you experienced going through all that?
Well, the biggest takeaway, and I try to, when I get asked questions like this, I literally try to stop for a second, and the first thing that comes to my mind is the right answer, because I'm big on intuition, and that's in my intuition talking to me. And you know what, Bo, the biggest thing I take from these that I really want to pass on to anybody is you're where you're supposed to be when every second of every day. And what I mean by that is I did my best to do my homework and to be prepared. So when my moments came, I never let them slip by. Yeah. And what I mean by that is not the opportunity to be there, but the opportunity to live there.
Right.
I can remember shaking Tommy Lee Jones's hand. I can remember walking down before we shot that shot. We had to set up a mini base camp about a mile down the road on that long road from Marfa, Texas. And when we set it up, we had to walk to where we were going to shoot the shot. And Joe Cohen, the Going co-directors, he said, "Hey, Chris, let's take a walk." So he and I walked that kind of long green mile. And the first thing he asked me was, "Hey, what do you think about this scene?" Now, we've got an Academy Award-winning director who's written countless classics, asking me, who he just met. We met at the audition, but basically we're just meeting and having a conversation for the first time for the most part right now. Mm-hmm. And he's asking me what I thought about this, what the backstory was, where we coming from, what's his character. As we walked that whole time, and not 1 second did I ever feel like he was saying it because he felt like he just needed to fill space. He was saying it because he was truly interested in what I had to say. But my point being about all this is not forgetting that moment, but most importantly, to give me the energy and the drive to continue to chase those moments, mm-hmm. is to realize that's exactly where I belong. And doing my best not to make that moment bigger than it needed to be.
Right. Staying humble.
Because if you do, it will consume you, and it will make your performance shit.
Right.
It will make your experience there shit. And you won't get the next opportunity, like, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. I got a movie coming out February 12th with Nicolas Cage called Willy's Wonderland. If I would have jacked up that one on my own 10, 12 years down the road, 15 years, the opportunity to act opposite Nick Cage in a pretty big role would have never come along.
Right.
So I think what I take from those experiences is knowing that I did the work and that I've chosen the path I'm supposed to be on, and I'm supposed to be here. And not that I don't respect the experience, but I'm here. I'm part of this. I'm a brick in the wall. I'm not just watching the wall.
Right.
And what's so amazing about that, even now I speak about it right now, and it was 15 years ago, is I was part of something that became great. And because of that, I think I can make that bigger, stronger, faster, better the next time. And I really, if there was some way I could bottle that and give it to folks who don't have confidence in the fact that they can go and do whatever the fuck they want to do, and excuse my French, but I get real passionate about this. Mm-hmm. If people want to go do something, I would pray that they would do their best, however they can, to not only do it, but when they do it, make sure they stop and live in that moment. The saying is, stop and smell the roses. Stop and live in the moment.
Yeah.
Remember it. Was the wind blowing? What did it smell like?
Yeah.
How did you feel that? all that kind of stuff. And I'm speaking from a very artistic viewpoint right now, but it doesn't matter. I mean, when you sit down and take the LSAT, remember that. How many hours you studied to just be in this test?
Mm-hmm.
But you're here. You paid your fee. You made it. What about when you pass it? What about when you get accepted to the bar or whatever it is, whatever you used to do? Be in the moment. Don't let it pass you. And don't you pass it up. Because there's going to be a time when life's low. You're going to need to pull some things out of your pocket that you leaned against in the past that made you feel good. And they'll help you get through.
Right.
It will. So I'm sorry to get a little artistic and passionate there, but I don't know if that made sense or not.
It made absolute sense. I hear you talk about the path a lot. I am not religious, but I am spiritual. And for me, I feel like the path is predetermined to a certain extent. And when you're not on it, it has a way of kicking you on it. The way that you thought things are going to turn out as you went towards that direction maybe turned out differently, but better. And I see that plan happen a lot in my guests. As you look back, do you see your path?
But I kind of fall in the same group. I was raised Southern Baptist, but I don't consider myself religious. I am spiritual. I believe in a higher power and a God that created me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually torn between these two. I've kind of gone back and forth my whole life, but probably right now is listen to my intuition, listen to my heart, my soul. I'm kind of torn. I don't necessarily believe I'm destined to do something because I'm a firm believer in being able to control where I go, what I do, and how I do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that we were put on the planet. We were put here as sentient beings to fulfill a purpose. And I took a course about 15 years ago called The Image Process. It's Sam Christensen, the best acting coach I've ever had. He passed away just a little over a year ago. But he completely transformed the way I look at my acting career and my life. The image process basically teaches people how the world perceives them. And then as an actor, what you do is you take that information and you use it in your marketing to give the world back or your fans back what they long for. So that can kind of perpetuate your career. But anybody can use this because we're all selling each other every day. So it helps you become a better salesperson, if that makes sense. So up to that point, I've probably been acting long enough to know that the world saw me as kind of a tough guy, a heavy, a cop, a badass, whatever you want to see. And I was probably 80% sure. After I took Sam's 4-day intensive, for the next 12 months, I booked 9 of 11 gigs. And some of those are No Country for Old Men, Harold and Kumar 2, the Prison Break TV show. Some of them were some big roles, some big commercials. And never had I stepped on a mark in an audition and felt 100% sure I was giving them exactly what they were seeing. So, there. So what did you initially? I apologize.
Oh no, I was just lost on what you're saying. There's a formula to your success, and I can understand why you're torn, because I see a lot of that as self-preparation, being prepared for when those opportunities came along, following your heart, your gut, and your desires. Let's. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. About the destiny, purpose. I'm sorry.
I want to talk about your clothing brand and plug that a little bit, along with any work that you have coming up in 21. This epidemic has had to have been hell for you. However, with your diversity, you probably were able to plug into a bunch of other things and still get a ton done. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, with the pandemic, obviously shooting anything as an actor just went away. I mean, I've shot one or two things. What that did allow me to do, though, is it opened up the door for me to spend a lot of time on polishing a few of my writing projects. One in particular, it's a TV show that I've written based on a feature screenplay I wrote about 10 years ago. And what it's really allowed me to do is to sit and get it out into the industry and get some good feedback and coverage on that.
Nice.
And then also really hone in on what's called the pitch deck and some other things. I also shot a 14-minute short film a couple years ago that supports it as a proof of concept. So it's allowed me to package that together very tight in the last probably 6 months, and I've been pitching it the last 3 to some executives and here in Hollywood, and getting some interest. But it's content might be a little warm for the way the environment is as far as society is concerned right now.
Sure.
So still working and honing it and making sure that it's as tight as possible. But 2021 is definitely, or 2020 has allowed me a lot of time to get my writing shored up, probably closer toward my acting career. Because my writing definitely stands out in my entertainment career and who I've worked with and what I've done with my writing. I've got some strong screenplays written. I just haven't had anything, any bites on anything, but that's what 2020 has allowed me to do, is to definitely elevate that up and get more interest from the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
And then in 20, what's that?
I was going to say, if your track record is any proof, this will take off for you. It's just a matter of time.
I'm hoping. It's the sell was looking. I wrote it as a vehicle for myself, and I've come to learn that it's a hard sell in general. I've got 3 I got to make. One, I've got to sell my screenplay. One, I've had to sell me, and then the other one, I have to sell me in my screenplay as the lead character. And I play characters. I played a lot of character roles, a lot of supports, but ultimately what I want to show Hollywood is I'm able to carry a movie or a show. Again, we're not speaking about leading man. I'm not trying to be Brad Pitt or Matthew McConaughey, but someone like that Charles Bronson or your Lee Marvins or, your Robert De Niro's or your Ray Liotta's. One of the taglines I use is bringing badass back to Hollywood. And what I mean by that is bringing authentic badass. I mean, you can throw dirt on the face of somebody and call them a badass, but you don't see the intensity of Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter too much, or Daniel Day-Lewis and There Will Be Blood. I mean, those guys bring a certain intensity that truly make almost anyone in the audience sit up on the edge of their seat. And you don't see a lot of that in badasses nowadays. I mean, I won't mention names, but they're just, there doesn't ring a trueness to it all.
Sure.
That maybe Charles Bronson or, again, even going all the way back to like a Spencer Tracy or Humphrey Bogart. So, yeah, to kind of bring some of that old school back, because we wouldn't be watching these movies over and over again on TCM or whatever it may be if they weren't still interesting characters. So, yeah, it's fun stuff. I can't deny it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, how's the clothing brand? My Life is War. When did you start that up?
I'm a big MMA fan. I'm not as much now as I used to be, but I like mixed martial arts in general, combat sports in general. And probably about 10 or 12 years ago, I had this idea for my own clothing line because people coming out, and I'm an artist, so I'm a writer. I've had these ideas about things as well. And my wife and I were sitting at a restaurant down in El Segundo, California, and had a little a yellow notepad and was writing these things out. And this had been stirring in my soul forever. And I came up with different names, and they just weren't working. It was like on the fringe, and it just didn't feel right. And we were talking one day, and finally, talking about life in general, how these guys' lives are. To be a fighter is kind of like being an actor. Most of these guys have to have regular jobs and then, fight on the side or fight at night or train at night. And, everybody talks about going to war when they're fighting and things like that, and trying to be respectful of the military as well, because, going to an actual war and being shot is a little different than choosing to go in the octagon.
Right. But
using it as a metaphor, thinking about life and how hard it is for anybody, really. I mean, whether you're going to an actual war, being shot at, going into the octagon, being punched, or just getting up on a daily basis, trying to maintain life as normal, making sure the kids are fed, bills are paid, and things like that. There's gas in the car. So everybody goes through their level of battle and war on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted people to understand that there is some human camaraderie in that. A lot of times when things are hard for us, we think we're the only one that's ever gone through something like that. And that's just not true. As we know, there's too much life is going to live.
Right.
That's the case. But to know that there's a group of people out there that can relate and possibly lift you up, because I'm always big on the uplift. Like as a sports fan, I'm always cheering for my team. Very seldom, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but very seldom do you see me putting the other team down. I'm always just lifting my team up.
Right.
So I'm always for the uplift. You know, how can we make things better? Let's acknowledge the problem, but let's actually give it only the time it needs, and then work on the solution. So that's kind of what the philosophy is here. It's, you know, to read a little bit here, it's to inspire humanity to trust its intuition, to embrace its primal instincts, and to bust ass every second of every day to maximize its potential. We live to survive so we can fight to succeed. And I think that, you know, everybody, from the moment the alarm clock goes off to the time they lay their head down, has had to swing at life at least once that day. And if they know that there's some kind of community or some kind of group that has that same feeling but responds in a different way, maybe it makes the world a little better place. You know,
Absolutely.
Maybe it's my little contribution to the world that helped it while I was here. So going back to what you were talking about earlier, just to tag it on there about destiny or purpose. And I remember finally what I was going to say there is that I believe at this time in my life, I was put on the planet for two reasons. That's to entertain, to inspire through entertainment, like through small screen or big screen. So when people see me, maybe there's something in it when they watch one of my performances that gives them hope that they can go do the thing they want to do. Not necessarily be an actor or whatever, but if there was something that they saw on the screen that they felt from me when they were watching, and it gets them to go do that, good for them. I mean, that's I'm humbled and impressed that would happen. The second thing is to help those who can't help themselves. And that comes along with giving them a sense of confidence and belief in themselves. Sure, if I need to stand in between them and the monster first, cool. But what if I can help them stand on their own and face the monster? That's more powerful than anything.
Right.
So my life as war is probably contributing to that aspect of my purpose more than anything.
You are an amazing person, Chris. I am so happy that we were able to connect. Anything that you want to share before we wrap this up?
I think I mentioned earlier about any project coming out. Willy's Wonderland is a horror film that I shot with Nicolas Cage back about a year ago, and it was supposed to come out on Halloween, but of course because of COVID, so it's actually due to launch on December 12th on demand. You can catch it. I'll be putting it up on some of my socials as time goes on as we get closer. So if anybody wants to check that out, you can usually find me at thechriswarner.com, and all my socials are on that website. But yeah, other than the film coming out and trying to pitch the TV show, or pitching the TV show as I go, I would just encourage people listening to, if you've got that thing burning inside of you, you know you can't deny. You had it in you forever. You lose sleep over it. You daydream at work about it. You waste hours on end researching it. Take the first step. Just take the first step and see what happens. Don't worry about the future so much so down the road. Take the first step. Make the first call. If you're writing a book, write the first word. And see what happens. Then take the next step if it's something you feel like you want to move forward on. If you don't move forward, if you take steps and you get somewhere, you're like, nah, that's not what I thought it was. Cool. You were going to live that life anyway. But move toward that. Right. And I'll leave you with this. I think three kinds of people in the world: those who watch the fire, those who walk through the fire, and those who become the fire. And for me, for you, I'd say become the fire.
I like that, Chris. You know, I would be honored if you'd have another talk with me in maybe a year or two, catch up, see what things are going on for you, how things have changed, maybe new developments. really enjoyed the insight and the time that you spent with me. I hope the feeling's mutual.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah, in a year or so, mark it in your calendar and give me a shout, and we'll see how much feet I put to dreams, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, brother. I'm rooting for you. I see great things for you. Thanks for spending today with me, and I wish the best out of 2021 for you, bud.
Thanks, Beau. You too, and take care.
Yeah, you
can
too.
ask.
All right. Take care. Bye now.